The Saab J-35 Draken entered its prototype stage in the early 1950s, at a time when the science of supersonic flight was still in its infancy outside of the United States and the Soviet Union. Sweden's determination to design and field its own supersonic fighter represented both a strategic gamble and a technical challenge, one that would test the ingenuity of its engineers and the resilience of its small aviation industry. The first prototype, designated Saab 210 Lil Draken, was a scaled-down test aircraft built to validate the radical double delta wing concept. This one-third scale demonstrator, which flew for the first time in January 1952, allowed Saab engineers to study airflow, stability, and low-speed handling before committing to a full-size design. It proved the basic concept was sound, showing that the double delta configuration could provide the necessary lift at low speeds while maintaining stability and control at supersonic velocities. The success of the Saab 210 gave the green light for full-scale development of the J-35. The first full-size Draken prototype, J-35-1, took to the air on the 25th of October 1955, with test pilot Bengt Olo at the controls. Powered by the license-built Rolls-Royce Avon, the flight confirmed Saab's predictions about the aircraft's performance. Within months, it demonstrated the ability to break the sound barrier in level flight, making Sweden one of the few nations in the world to achieve a domestically designed supersonic jet. However, the test program also revealed shortcomings. Engine reliability was a persistent issue, particularly with the Swedish-built RM6A/B versions of the Avon, which required further refinement before they could be deemed suitable for frontline service. Handling characteristics were another area of focus. At supersonic speeds, the Draken's double delta wing provided excellent stability, but at low speeds it created new aerodynamic challenges. Pilots had to learn unique landing techniques, including the famous Cobra-style high angle of attack approach, which allowed the aircraft to land safely on Sweden's relatively short and dispersed runways. Mastering these techniques required new training methods and adjustments to flight procedures, but they also demonstrated the adaptability of the design. Weapons testing was conducted throughout the late 1950s. The Draken was intended as an all-weather interceptor, so it was equipped with radar and fire control systems capable of guiding radar homing and infrared-guided missiles. Swedish engineers integrated the Hughes Falcon missile system, which was licensed for domestic production, alongside cannons for close-range engagements. The aircraft's avionics suite, though modest compared to American or Soviet systems, gave it the ability to operate day or night in poor weather conditions, a vital requirement for Sweden's defensive doctrine. Transition from prototype to production was not without obstacles. The Swedish Air Force demanded an aircraft capable of defending national airspace against high-speed Soviet bombers, but production schedules were delayed by the complexity of the new engine, avionics, and wing structure. Initial orders were placed in 1956, but the first operational aircraft only entered service in 1960. By then, the Draken had already demonstrated it could exceed Mach 2 in a dive and maintain excellent performance across a wide envelope, confirming its status as one of the most advanced fighters of its generation. The prototype and testing era of the Draken highlighted both Sweden's boldness and its pragmatism. The double delta wing concept was unproven when Saab committed to it, yet through careful experimentation, scaled prototypes, and rigorous flight trials, it became a defining feature of the aircraft and a lasting contribution to aviation design. By the time the first production models rolled out, the J-35 Draken had already secured its place in history as the first European-built fighter to combine supersonic speed, advanced aerodynamics, and true operational capability, an achievement that placed Sweden firmly among the leaders of Cold War aerospace innovation. The Saab J-35 Draken entered service with the Swedish Air Force in 1960, marking a milestone in the nation's ability to defend its neutrality in an increasingly volatile Cold War environment. The first operational unit to receive the aircraft was F-13 Wing at Norrköping, which had previously flown the Saab J-29 Tunen. The transition to the Draken required extensive retraining for pilots, not only due to the aircraft's supersonic capabilities, but also because of its unique handling characteristics at low speeds. The high angle of attack landing profile demanded precise control and practice, But once mastered, it enabled the Draken to operate from Sweden's network of short runways and dispersed road bases, an integral part of the country's defense doctrine. Early operational use revealed the Draken to be a formidable interceptor. With a top speed exceeding Mach 2 in dives and Mach 1.8 in level flight, it could climb rapidly to meet intruding bombers. Its radar and fire control systems, though not as advanced as those in American or Soviet interceptors, were sufficient to guide its air-to-air missiles, giving Sweden an all-weather defense capability. Armed with domestically produced versions of the Hughes Falcon missile and later Sidewinders, along with internal cannons, the Draken provided a balanced mix of long-range and close combat options. Pilot reactions were overwhelmingly positive once the initial learning curve was overcome. They praised the aircraft's acceleration, stability at high speeds, and maneuverability compared to earlier Swedish fighters. The double delta wing gave the Draken an edge in sustained turns at supersonic velocities, although pilots noted that it demanded caution in tight maneuvers at lower speeds. The aircraft's ability to operate in the harsh Scandinavian climate, including winter conditions on icy runways, further underscored its suitability for Sweden's defense requirements. The Draken quickly became the backbone of Sweden's air defense network. It was deployed across multiple wings, each responsible for guarding different sectors of Swedish airspace. Given Sweden's doctrine of neutrality, the Draken's missions were primarily defensive. High-speed interceptions of unidentified aircraft approaching Swedish borders, many of them Soviet bombers or reconnaissance planes probing Baltic routes. While the Draken never fired in anger during these patrols, it frequently demonstrated its deterrent value by shadowing intruders and asserting Sweden's readiness to defend its neutrality. Beyond routine patrols, the Draken played an important role in developing Sweden's BAST 60 concept, a system of dispersed operations in which aircraft could operate from stretches of public roads, concealed bases, and hardened shelters. Exercises conducted throughout the 1960s and 1970s demonstrated that the Draken could be fueled, armed, and launched from hidden bases within minutes, complicating any potential adversary's targeting plans. This flexibility ensured that Sweden's fighter force could survive a surprise attack and remain capable of defending national airspace even under heavy pressure. The introduction of the Draken also reinforced Sweden's independence from foreign suppliers. Although the engine was based on a British design and the missile system was derived from American technology, the integration, airframe, and systems were developed and produced domestically. This self-reliance was vital to Sweden's Cold War strategy, ensuring that its air defense capabilities could not be compromised by shifts in alliance politics or embargoes. By the mid-1960s, the Draken had established itself as one of the most advanced fighters in Europe. While Sweden remained neutral and avoided combat operations, its air force gained a reputation for fielding a highly capable aircraft that could rival those of the superpowers. For Swedish pilots, the Draken represented both a leap in capability and a source of pride, embodying the nation's determination to protect its neutrality through technological innovation and disciplined training. As the 1960s progressed, the Saab J-35 Draken settled into its role as the backbone of Sweden's air defense, but it also began to attract international attention. Sweden's policy of neutrality limited its defense exports, yet the Draken was one of the few advanced Western fighters made available to nations outside NATO and the Warsaw Pact, a reflection of Sweden's unique position in the Cold War. Even before exports materialized, the aircraft's growing reputation underscored its effectiveness. Within the Swedish Air Force, the Draken proved itself during repeated large-scale exercises designed to test the Base 60 and later Base 90 systems of dispersed operations. The aircraft was regularly deployed to hidden airstrips, forest clearings, and stretches of highway, where ground crews could refuel and rearm it under austere conditions. Pilots learned to conduct touch-and-go landings on narrow roadways, underscoring the design's adaptability. These exercises validated Sweden's defensive doctrine. Even if major airbases were destroyed in a first strike, the Draken force could survive and continue to patrol national airspace. Operational patrols along Sweden's borders formed the day-to-day reality of Draken service. Throughout the Cold War, Swedish radar frequently detected Soviet bombers, maritime reconnaissance aircraft, and fighters approaching from the Baltic. J-35 units were scrambled to intercept and shadow these intruders, often flying close enough for visual identification. Such missions were tense but routine, with Draken pilots demonstrating both the speed to close rapidly and the endurance to escort foreign aircraft until they left Swedish airspace. Although no live combat occurred, these encounters provided valuable real-world experience and emphasized the importance of readiness. Pilot feedback remained consistently strong. Many regarded the Draken as demanding but highly rewarding to fly. Its double delta wing gave it excellent stability at supersonic speeds and allowed for maneuvers not possible in more conventional designs. At the same time, it required mastery of the steep, high angle of attack landing technique, a skill that became a hallmark of Swedish fighter pilot training. Those who transitioned from earlier aircraft like the J-29 Tunen or J-32 Lansen often spoke of the Draken as a generational leap in performance, requiring a different mindset and far more precise handling. The Draken's introduction also prompted changes in Swedish air tactics. The aircraft's ability to climb quickly and engage high-altitude targets allowed the Air Force to shift focus from bomber interception alone to more flexible air defense operations. Missile integration gave it the ability to strike at longer ranges, while its cannons provided a last line of defense in close engagements. Exercises simulated massed Soviet bomber raids with Draken squadrons scrambling from dispersed bases, climbing to altitude, and intercepting enemy formations in coordinated waves. These scenarios underscored the Draken's primary role: to defend Sweden's skies in the first, decisive minutes of a potential conflict. In the broader context of Europe, the Draken's service during this period stood out as a symbol of independent technological achievement. While NATO countries fielded American-built fighters and the Warsaw Pact relied on Soviet designs, Sweden's domestically produced Draken demonstrated that a smaller, neutral nation could field an advanced supersonic aircraft that matched the performance of the great powers. Its presence in the Swedish inventory served as both a deterrent and a statement of sovereignty, reinforcing Sweden's ability to defend itself without reliance on external alliances. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Draken had become firmly embedded in Swedish defense planning. It formed the centerpiece of a national air strategy built on speed, dispersal, and survivability, and its regular interceptions of foreign aircraft underscored its practical value. Though untested in combat, the Draken had proven itself as a credible defender of Sweden's neutrality, shaping the country's air doctrine and earning the respect of both its pilots and those who encountered it in the skies over the Baltic. During the 1970s and 1980s, the Saab J-35 Draken entered the phase of its career in which it had to adapt to new threats, changing technologies, and the evolving realities of Cold War air combat. While originally designed as a high-speed interceptor to counter Soviet bombers, the Draken gradually expanded into broader roles, reflecting both Sweden's strategic requirements and the aircraft's own versatility. In Swedish service, the Draken's primary mission remained interception. Soviet aviation activity over the Baltic Sea increased during these decades, with two 16 Badger bombers, two 95 Bears, and reconnaissance aircraft routinely flying near Swedish airspace. J-35 squadrons were tasked with intercepting and identifying these aircraft, often under challenging conditions such as poor weather or nighttime operations. The Draken's powerful radar and supersonic speed allowed it to close quickly with intruders, making it a reliable deterrent. Swedish pilots logged hundreds of such intercept missions, many of which ended with photographs of Soviet bombers taken from the cockpit of a Draken flying just meters away. As the Cold War intensified, new requirements emerged. Sweden recognized that defending its airspace required not only the ability to stop high-altitude bombers, but also to counter fast Soviet fighters and low-level penetrators. Drakens were adapted for these missions, receiving improved radar systems and electronic countermeasures to survive in increasingly contested air environments. Exercises shifted focus to intercepting low-flying targets, simulating cruise missiles or tactical strike aircraft. The Draken's double delta wing, which had once been a radical experiment, continued to prove its worth by providing both stability at speed and agility in low-altitude maneuvers. Operational training emphasized survivability under wartime conditions. The BAS-60 and later BAS-90 systems of road-based operations remained central, with Drakens practicing quick dispersals to hidden locations and rapid turnaround for multiple sorties. Crews drilled in loading Sidewinder missiles and cannons within minutes, ensuring the aircraft could respond immediately to any incursion. These exercises became a hallmark of Sweden's defensive posture and demonstrated how the Draken could function effectively in the decentralized, resilient system the Swedish Air Force envisioned. Beyond Sweden, the Draken entered active international service, bringing combat adaptation into sharper focus. In the early 1970s, Austria purchased J-35S to modernize its air defense fleet. Unlike Sweden, Austria faced specific political restrictions. It was prohibited from operating aircraft with guided missiles until the late 1980s. As a result, Austrian Drakens initially flew with only cannons, later receiving Sidewinders once restrictions eased. Despite these limitations, the aircraft gave Austria its first supersonic capability and performed border patrols throughout the Cold War, often intercepting Warsaw Pact aircraft that strayed close to Austrian airspace. Denmark, Finland, and even the United States also operated the Draken in varying capacities. Denmark used it as a frontline fighter equipped with both air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons, adapting the aircraft for multi-role operations in NATO exercises. Finland, receiving Drakens in the 1970s, relied heavily on them for national defense well into the 1990s, using the type to patrol its long border with the Soviet Union. The U.S. Air National Guard even acquired refurbished Drakens later for use as aggressor aircraft in training, taking advantage of their unique aerodynamic performance to simulate potential adversaries. Combat trials, while not involving direct wartime engagements, tested the Draken under demanding conditions. Its adaptability to different climates and doctrines, from Sweden's icy road bases to Denmark's NATO exercises and Austria's missile-restricted patrols, demonstrated the flexibility of the design. Pilots across multiple nations consistently praised its stability at high speeds, its ability to climb rapidly, and its durability in service. By the mid-1980s, however, the Draken began to face the limits of its design. New Soviet aircraft such as the MiG-29 Fulcrum and Su-27 Flanker represented a new generation of fighters with advanced avionics, powerful engines, and heavy weapons loads. The Draken, while still respected, was increasingly outmatched in potential peer combat. Sweden began introducing the Saab 37 Viggen as its replacement, but Drakens remained vital for secondary duties and as frontline fighters until they could be fully phased out. This period of adaptation highlighted both the strengths and weaknesses of Sweden's Cold War Draken. It had fulfilled its mission as a supersonic interceptor for decades, expanded into multi-role tasks, and proven itself in diverse international service. Yet it also showed the challenges of keeping a 1950s design relevant in the face of rapidly advancing technology. The Draken's continued operational use into the late Cold War testified to its robust engineering and the foresight of its designers, even as it prepared to give way to the next generation of Swedish fighters. The evolution of the Saab J-35 Draken over its long career was marked by a series of variants, each reflecting the changing requirements of the Swedish Air Force and the diverse needs of its export customers. While the airframe remained fundamentally consistent, the aircraft underwent significant upgrades in radar, avionics, engines, and mission profiles, demonstrating a remarkable adaptability for a design conceived in the early 1950s. The first production model, the J-35A, entered service in 1960. It was fitted with the Svenska Flygmotor RM-6B, a license-built Rolls-Royce Avon engine, and armed with a pair of 30 mm Aden cannons and Hughes Falcon guided missiles. The radar, though basic by later standards, provided the aircraft with true all-weather interception capability. Only around 90 of this initial variant were built, serving primarily as a stepping stone while Saab worked on improved configurations. The J-35B represented the first major refinement. Entering service in 1962, it incorporated an improved RM-6C engine with afterburner and an upgraded PS-03RA radar, derived from American designs but adapted domestically. It also introduced the ability to fire both radar-guided and infrared-guided versions of the Falcon missile, alongside the AIM-9 Sidewinder, enhancing its flexibility in combat. The B model significantly expanded the Draken's operational envelope and became the backbone of Sweden's interceptor force during the early 1960s. As the aircraft matured, new roles were considered. The J-35D appeared in 1963, featuring more fuel capacity, increased thrust, and further refined avionics. This variant was better suited for longer interception missions over Sweden's expansive airspace. The D model also standardized the use of 4 underwing hardpoints, allowing for a wider variety of weapons. Production continued into the mid-1960s, ensuring that the Draken force grew in both quality and numbers. Recognizing the need for specialized training, Saab also developed the SK-35C, a 2-seat trainer version with a raised rear cockpit for instructors. Although lacking some of the combat capability of single-seat models, it was essential for preparing pilots to master the Draken's demanding flight characteristics, particularly its high angle of attack landing profile. The most important Swedish variant was the J-35IEF, introduced in 1965. This model carried advanced radar, new fire control systems, and the Swedish-developed RB-27 and RB-28 missiles, based on the American Falcon but improved domestically. The F model was also equipped with electronic countermeasures, addressing the growing importance of survivability in the face of Soviet surface-to-air missile systems. The J-35F formed the backbone of Sweden's air defense for nearly 2 decades, ensuring the type remained credible well into the late Cold War. Export variants played a major role in the Draken's long life. Denmark acquired the F-35, RF-35, and TF-35 versions, which were adapted for NATO operations and included ground attack capabilities absent from Swedish models. Finland received modified J-35Xs, which were later upgraded domestically to extend their service life. Austria operated refurbished J-35Jo aircraft, initially without missiles due to treaty restrictions, before integrating Sidewinders later on. Each export customer tailored the Draken to its own doctrine, demonstrating the platform's versatility. By the late 1970s, modernization programs kept the Draken relevant. Avionics upgrades, improved radars, and new missiles such as the AIM-9J Sidewinder extended its combat capabilities. Even as Sweden introduced the Saab 37 Viggen, Draken units were updated to serve in secondary roles, with the final Swedish variant, the J-35J, entering service in the late 1980s. This modernization added more advanced countermeasures, strengthened wings, and increased fuel capacity, ensuring the aircraft could remain viable until the arrival of the JAS-39 Gripen. Over 3 decades, the Saab J-35 evolved from an early supersonic interceptor into a multi-role platform used across several nations. Its variants reflected not only Sweden's careful incremental modernization strategy, but also the unique needs of its foreign operators. This adaptability, combined with robust engineering, allowed the Draken to remain in service far longer than most aircraft of its generation, underscoring its status as one of the most enduring and innovative Cold War fighters. The global impact and legacy of the Saab J-35 Draken extended far beyond its years of active frontline service, leaving an enduring mark on both Swedish aviation and international air power during the Cold War. While it was not produced in the vast numbers of American or Soviet fighters, the Draken's advanced design, long service life, and export success ensured that it influenced multiple air forces and inspired subsequent aircraft development. In Sweden, the Draken became more than just a fighter. It was a strategic asset that underpinned the country's entire air defense system from the early 1960s through the 1980s. Its ability to operate from dispersed bases in accordance with the BAS-60 and BAS-90 doctrines gave Sweden a uniquely resilient defensive posture. The aircraft's combination of speed, range, and supersonic climb made it an ideal counter to Soviet bombers probing the Baltic approaches. Even as newer designs such as the Saab 37 Viggen entered service, the Draken continued to provide a vital second line of defense, its modernized J-35J version flying in frontline roles until 1999. Internationally, the Draken achieved export success that extended its legacy well beyond Sweden. Denmark, Finland, and Austria each integrated the fighter into their national defense structures. Denmark adapted its F-35 and RF-35 variants to NATO standards, employing them for both air defense and ground attack missions. Finland, operating Drakens under strict neutrality agreements, relied on them as its principal fighter into the 1990s. customizing avionics and extending service life through domestic upgrades. Austria purchased refurbished J-35Os, which became its first supersonic fighters and remained in service until 2005, making them the last operational Drakens in the world. The aircraft's adaptability was further demonstrated by its use outside traditional service roles. In the 1990s and 2000s, several surplus Drakens were acquired by the United States for use as training and adversary aircraft. Private companies such as the National Test Pilot School and Draken International flew the type to provide dissimilar air combat training for NATO and U.S. forces. In this role, decades after its design, the Draken continued to challenge modern pilots with its unique flight characteristics, high-speed performance, and unusual double-delta handling. Technologically, the Draken's legacy rests in its pioneering aerodynamics. The double-delta wing, first validated with the Saab 210 testbed, proved to be a groundbreaking solution for balancing high-speed supersonic performance with low-speed handling. This innovation influenced subsequent designs worldwide, demonstrating that small nations could make significant contributions to advanced aeronautics. The Draken also showcased the importance of designing aircraft that fit specific strategic doctrines, in Sweden's case, dispersal and survivability in the event of war. Culturally, the J-35 became a symbol of Sweden's independent defense capability during the Cold War. It stood as proof that a neutral country could produce a cutting-edge supersonic aircraft without relying on the superpowers. For Swedish pilots, it represented a demanding but rewarding machine, one that required skill and precision but delivered world-class performance in return. For international operators, it was a trusted workhorse that adapted to different climates, doctrines, and political restrictions, while maintaining its reputation as a reliable supersonic interceptor. Today, preserved Drakens can be found in museums across Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Austria, as well as in the United States. Several remain airworthy in private hands, flying at air shows where their distinctive silhouette and Cobra-style landing approach continue to captivate aviation enthusiasts. These aircraft serve not only as reminders of a unique Cold War design, but also as tributes to Sweden's ingenuity in aerospace engineering. Ultimately, the Saab J-35 Draken's global impact lies in its dual role as both a national guardian and an international ambassador of Swedish technology. It was never engaged in direct combat, yet it shaped doctrines, trained generations of pilots, and influenced aircraft design for decades. Its longevity, spanning service from 1960 until 2005, testifies to the brilliance of its design and the care with which it was modernized. The Draken remains one of the most iconic Cold War fighters, remembered as Sweden's Cold War Dragon, a machine that embodied innovation, resilience, and independence in an era defined by superpower rivalry. Beyond its well-documented career as Sweden's Cold War interceptor and export success, the Saab J-35 Draken also played roles that were less visible, involving experimental projects, specialized adaptations, and test duties that extended its utility far beyond traditional squadron service. These lesser-known chapters reveal how the Draken became not only an operational aircraft, but also a versatile platform for innovation. One of the most distinctive aspects of the Draken's unseen service was its role in aerodynamic research. The aircraft's double-delta wing, while groundbreaking, generated unique handling characteristics at extreme angles of attack. Saab and the Swedish Air Force exploited surplus and retired airframes for experimental testing, using them to refine landing techniques, study high-alpha maneuvers, and validate flight control concepts. Some of this work contributed indirectly to later Swedish designs, including the Saab 37 Viggen and eventually the JAS 39 Gripen, which inherited lessons from the Draken's unconventional aerodynamics. Another area of experimentation involved electronic warfare. Certain Drakens were fitted with advanced jamming pods, radar warning receivers, and electronic countermeasure systems for trials, even if these capabilities were not widely fielded in frontline units. These testbeds provided Sweden with critical insights into Soviet radar technology and missile guidance systems, helping shape defensive tactics for both the Draken and its successor, the Viggen. Reconnaissance also represented a lesser-known role. The S-35E variant, based on the J-35D, was adapted for photo reconnaissance duties with cameras replacing some of the fighter's systems. These aircraft flew long-range tactical reconnaissance missions during exercises and border patrols, gathering imagery of maritime and ground activity in the Baltic region. While Sweden maintained strict neutrality, its reconnaissance Drakens contributed to the nation's broader surveillance network, ensuring that decision-makers had reliable intelligence about the activities of nearby powers. Export customers also created unique operational contexts for the Draken. In Finland, Drakens were modified and upgraded under the Kuopio program in the 1990s, extending their service life with new avionics and structural reinforcements. In Austria, where treaty restrictions initially prevented the use of guided missiles, Drakens patrolled national airspace armed only with cannons until restrictions eased in the late 1980s. These constraints gave the Austrian J-35O a unique operational profile, emphasizing visual identification and deterrence rather than long-range missile interception. One particularly unusual chapter occurred in the United States, where surplus Drakens were sold to private contractors and used as adversary aircraft in training programs. Organizations like the National Test Pilot School employed them for advanced pilot instruction, while Draken International used them into the 21st century to simulate enemy fighters during exercises with NATO and US forces. For modern pilots, the chance to train against a vintage Cold War design with supersonic capability offered a rare and valuable experience. Finally, the Draken served as a symbolic test of Sweden's defense doctrine itself. Its participation in dispersed base exercises where aircraft operated from hidden roadways and makeshift facilities validated strategies that later became hallmarks of Swedish defense planning. These demonstrations, rarely publicized at the time, proved that Sweden could maintain operational air power even in the event of surprise attacks on its main airfields. In reflecting on these lesser-known missions, it becomes clear that the Draken was more than just an interceptor. It was a flexible platform, adaptable to reconnaissance, electronic warfare testing, pilot training, and adversary simulation, all while serving as a testbed for technologies that informed future Swedish aircraft. These unseen chapters highlight the depth of its contribution, showing how the Draken's influence reached far beyond its visible role as Sweden's Cold War guardian. Even in retirement, it continued to shape aviation knowledge, ensuring its legacy as both a fighter and a foundation for innovation. By the time the Saab J-35 Draken reached the end of its operational life, it had already secured its place as one of the most important European fighters of the Cold War era. Its retirement marked not just the phasing out of an aircraft, but the closing of a chapter in Sweden's independent journey through aerospace innovation. The Draken had served for nearly 4 decades, spanning the technological transformation from second-generation supersonic fighters to multi-role digital platforms like the Gripen. In Sweden, the last frontline J-35J Drakens were withdrawn from active service in 1999, though some remained in secondary roles for a short period afterward. By then, the JAS-39 Gripen had begun to replace the Draken, embodying the lessons of its predecessor while introducing a wholly new level of avionics, weapons integration, and multi-role capability. For many Swedish pilots, the transition was both symbolic and personal. The Draken had been a demanding but rewarding aircraft to fly, and mastering its unique high angle of attack landings became a rite of passage that defined generations of aviators. Outside Sweden, the Draken endured even longer. Austria, which had purchased refurbished J-35Os in the early 1980s, continued to fly them until 2005, making them the last operational Drakens in the world. Their retirement was not only the end of Austria's Draken fleet, but also the final farewell to the type as an active fighter anywhere. In Finland, Draken served from the 1970s into the 1990s with extensive local upgrades that gave them improved avionics and extended airframe lives. Denmark, too, kept its F-35S and RF-35S in service until the early 1990s, relying on them for both NATO and national defense duties. The Draken's longevity was due in no small part to its robust design and adaptability. Few aircraft conceived in the 1950s could remain credible in the 1990s, yet through incremental modernization, the Draken remained a viable air defense asset for decades. Its ability to integrate new missiles, improved radars, and updated countermeasure systems allowed it to hold its ground against evolving threats, even as fourth-generation fighters became the global standard. In retirement, the Draken gained a second life as both a historical artifact and a practical tool. Several aircraft were sold to private operators, most notably in the United States, where they were flown by the National Test Pilot School and Draken International as adversary aircraft. In this capacity, long after leaving frontline service, the Draken continued to challenge modern pilots, simulating potential adversaries with its unique performance profile. At the same time, preserved Drakens became popular museum exhibits across Europe and North America. The Swedish Air Force Museum at Linköping, the Finnish Air Force Museum, and the Austrian Aviation Museum all maintain examples, while airworthy aircraft appear at air shows performing the iconic Cobra-style high angle of attack maneuver that once defined their operational landings. Culturally, the Draken became more than a weapon system. It symbolized Sweden's Cold War identity. Neutral but heavily armed, technologically independent yet outward-looking. It demonstrated that a small country standing outside the two major blocs could field an advanced supersonic fighter that rivaled the designs of the superpowers. For international operators, it became both a reliable frontline machine and a symbol of sovereignty, representing a modern capability that smaller nations could maintain independently of the major alliances. The legacy of the Saab J-35 Draken therefore extends beyond its specifications or service record. It stands as a testament to Sweden's ability to innovate under pressure, to engineer solutions suited to its unique geography and doctrine, and to sustain a fighter program that delivered relevance for over 40 years. Its distinctive double-delta silhouette remains instantly recognizable, a reminder of an era when Sweden carved its own path in aerospace design. Though retired, the Draken endures in museums, in private hands, and in memory, rightly remembered as Sweden's Cold War Dragon, an aircraft that guarded its skies and demonstrated its independence in one of the most polarized periods of modern history. The closing legacy of the Saab J-35 Draken is defined not only by its long operational service, but also by the enduring respect it earned among pilots, engineers, and historians. Unlike many Cold War fighters that disappeared quickly once their replacements arrived, the Draken transitioned gracefully into history, remembered as both a technological milestone and a symbol of Sweden's independent defense policy. One of the most striking aspects of the Draken's legacy was its contribution to pilot training and tactical development. Generations of Swedish Air Force pilots learned the fundamentals of supersonic interception in the cockpit of the J-35. Its demanding flight profile, especially the high angle of attack landing approach, instilled discipline and precision in its operators. This culture of rigorous training carried forward into the era of the Viggen and Gripen, ensuring that Sweden's pilots maintained a high standard of competence despite the relatively small size of the nation's air force. In export countries too, the Draken left its mark. Austrian, Danish, and Finnish pilots credited the aircraft with providing a true leap in capability, allowing their air forces to operate supersonic fighters on par with the superpowers for the first time. Technologically, the Draken's double-delta wing remains one of its most important contributions to aviation. At the time of its introduction, it represented an unproven and risky solution, but it delivered exactly what Swedish planners required: stability and maneuverability across both supersonic and low-speed flight regimes. This innovation influenced not only subsequent Saab designs, but also contributed to broader global understanding of delta wing aerodynamics. Aircraft like the Viggen and Gripen built upon these principles, demonstrating how a national design philosophy could evolve across decades. The Draken also left a broader strategic legacy. It validated Sweden's approach of self-reliance in defense production during the Cold War, showing that even a medium-sized neutral state could field advanced weaponry independent of the major blocs. The Draken stood as both deterrent and declaration, signaling that Sweden's neutrality was not passive but actively defended by technology that rivaled the best in the world. For international operators such as Finland and Austria, the Draken symbolized an ability to maintain sovereign defense capability outside of the direct control of NATO or the Warsaw Pact. Culturally, the Draken became an icon of Swedish aviation. Its distinctive silhouette and reputation for reliability made it a source of national pride. Air shows, military parades, and later museum displays ensured that the public recognized the Cold War Dragon as more than a machine. It became part of Sweden's modern identity. Its endurance, serving from the early 1960s until the mid-2000s in some countries, reinforced its place as one of the longest-serving European-designed fighters of the 20th century. Today, surviving Drakens in museums and private collections serve as both educational artifacts and living tributes to Cold War aviation. Airworthy examples continue to fly at air shows in Europe and North America, demonstrating the aircraft's distinctive performance and reminding audiences of its role in shaping Cold War aerial defense. For modern aviators, engineers, and enthusiasts, the Draken stands as a case study in how innovation, doctrine, and national necessity can combine to produce an aircraft of lasting significance. In closing, the Saab J-35 Draken was far more than Sweden's first supersonic fighter. It was a statement of independence, a technological pioneer, and a reliable guardian of national airspace for over 4 decades. Though it never saw combat, its impact was profound, influencing tactics, training, and design philosophy across multiple generations. Its name, Draken, the dragon, remains fitting, symbolizing a Cold War guardian whose shadow stretched far beyond Sweden's borders, and whose legacy continues to resonate in the story of military aviation. By the time the Saab J-35 Draken made its final flights in the early 2000s, it had already outlived most of its contemporaries and cemented itself as one of the longest-serving second-generation jet fighters in history. Its retirement closed a remarkable 4-decade career that spanned the height of the Cold War, the end of superpower confrontation, and the beginning of a new era of multi-role fighters. In Sweden, the last upgraded J-35J models were phased out in 1999, marking the end of an aircraft that had been in continuous frontline service since 1960. By then, the JAS-39 Gripen had taken over as the centerpiece of Sweden's air defense, embodying digital avionics, advanced weapons integration, and full multi-role flexibility. Yet for Swedish pilots, the transition from the Draken was not just a change of machine, but the passing of a generational torch. Mastery of the Draken's demanding handling, especially its steep, high angle of attack landing approach, had become a rite of passage. Its retirement symbolized both the end of an era and the culmination of lessons that would inform Gripen doctrine and pilot culture. Elsewhere in Europe, the Draken lingered even longer. Finland operated its fleet until 2000, after extensive local upgrades that gave the aircraft renewed avionics and structural life extension. Austria, the final operator, flew its Drakens until 2005 when they were replaced by Eurofighter Typhoons. For Austrian pilots, the Draken had provided more than 2 decades of reliable air policing over the Alps, a crucial deterrent even under the country's strict political restrictions. The sight of the last Austrian Draken standing down symbolized not only the retirement of a specific fighter, but also the closing of Europe's Cold War jet age. The afterlife of the Draken was almost as significant as its operational service. Several airframes were purchased by the United States for use as adversary aircraft, flown by private contractors such as Draken International and the National Test Pilot School. In this role, the J-35 continued to provide value decades after its introduction, simulating foreign fighters and challenging new generations of NATO pilots in training exercises. At the same time, numerous preserved examples entered museums in Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Austria, and beyond, where they remain as physical testaments to Sweden's independent design philosophy. In the broader context of military aviation, the Draken's place is unique. It was never mass-produced in the tens of thousands like American or Soviet fighters, nor did it ever see combat. Yet it represented something equally important: the ability of a neutral, mid-sized nation to field a supersonic interceptor that matched the world's best and remained relevant for over 40 years. Its double-delta wing design influenced aerodynamics globally, while its integration into dispersed road-based operations offered a model of resilience that has since been studied by other nations. As historians and aviators look back, the Draken is remembered as more than a Cold War tool. It is regarded as a technological pioneer, a symbol of Swedish independence, and a bridge between early supersonic designs and the multi-role fighters of the late 20th century. The aircraft's longevity, adaptability, and iconic shape ensure that its reputation endures. The Saab J-35. Draken closed its story not in the chaos of combat, but in the steady fulfillment of its mission, safeguarding airspace, deterring aggression and demonstrating that innovation and discipline could offset the limitations of scale. Its name, Draken, the dragon, remains apt, for like a dragon, it commanded respect, inspired awe, and left a legacy that continues to cast a long shadow over the history of Cold War aviation.